how poor people are identified and measured overview.
Now, next obvious question is how we measure poverty. How are poor people identified?
Good question. Let's look at the park example again. We measure the poverty through the total area of park, which was in disadvantageous section, defined by lack of availability of air, sunlight, water supply, fertilizers and pesticides. In a small park like this, it is quite easy to find areas where there is limited access to development resources. But imagine if we have to do the same exercise for all the parks in the country. A massive work, right? In the real world, the idea, moreover, remains the same. Poor or underprivileged section of society who have limited or no access to basic needs of quality life like access to food, shelter, clothing, education, safe drinking water, skills and healthcare. Since government cannot count all the poor people residing in lakhs of villages and cities, they take broad approximates. The Planning Commission, which is the nodal agency for estimating the approximate number and proportion of people living below the poverty line at national and state levels, publishes separate poverty line for rural and urban areas. These poverty estimates are based on a large sample survey of household consumption and expenditure, also known as National Sample Survey (NSS), after an interval of approximately 5 years. In the post-independence era, there have been several attempts to work out a mechanism to identify the number of poor in the country. In 1962, Planning Commission formed a study group. In 1979, another body called the Task Force on Projections of Minimum Needs and Effective Consumption Demand was formed. The Commission has been estimating the poverty line and poverty ratio from 1993-94 to 2009-2010 on the basis of the methodology spelt out in the report of the expert group on estimation of number and proportion of poor, known as Lakadwala Committee Report. The poverty estimate in India as per this report is solely based on calorie intake of food. It is defined as consumption of 2,100 calories per day for urban population and 2,400 calories per day for rural population. The difference is because of the perception that villages need more calories because they do more physical activity. Hence, if a person has enough money to buy 2,400 and 2,100 calories worth of food in rural and urban areas respectively, he or she is supposed to be above poverty line. The money required to buy food worth 2,100 calories a day for a month is 538 rupees, that is 18 rupees per day in the urban areas, and is close to 356 rupees, that is 12 rupees per day in rural areas as per 2004-2005 estimates. The poverty line is calculated every 5 years. The new estimation was done in the recent past, that is 2009-2010, taking into account the inflation. This resulted into 962 rupees a month for urban areas and 768 rupees a month in rural areas. If you take daily requirement, it is 32 rupees a day in urban area and 26 rupees a day in rural area. Historically, All India Rural and Urban Poverty Line Basket (PLBs) were derived for rural and urban areas separately, anchored in the per capita calorie norms of 2,400 for rural and 2,100 for urban per day. Major criticisms of these poverty lines have been commonly aired are the consumption patterns underlying the rural and urban PLBs remained tied down to those observed more than 3 decades ago, that is, National Sample Survey in 1973-74, and hence had become outdated. The earlier poverty lines assumed that basic social services of healthcare, education, shelter, safe drinking water, and sanitation would be supplied by the state, and hence no account was taken of either the increase in the proportion of these in total expenditure over time or of their proper representation in available price indices. With the continuing flurry of criticism regarding taking only calories consumption as a measure of poverty and in perennial quest of improving BPL estimates, Indian government established Suresh Tendulkar Committee in 2004-2005 to suggest better way of estimating poverty. As per this committee method, which is based on latest available National Sample Survey data, the new poverty line for 2009-2010 in terms of money spent on consumption is 859 rupees 60 paise per month or 28 rupees 65 paise per day per person in urban areas and 672 rupees 80 paise or 22 rupees 42 paise per day per person in rural areas. Also, the calorie norms are revised downward to 1,800 calorie per day. Mainly, there are 3 changes proposed by Tendulkar Committee, or move away from calorie anchor, but test for the adequacy of actual food expenditure near the poverty line to ensure certain aggregate nutritional outcomes in sync with the numbers published by Food and Agriculture Committee. Do not discriminate between the rural and the urban population and recommend providing a uniform PLB based on the latest available observed household consumption data to both the rural and the urban populations. This corrects for the outdated PLBs. Incorporate an explicit provision in price indices for private expenditure on health and education, which has been rising over time, and test for their adequacy to ensure certain desirable educational and health outcomes. This numerical poverty line has to be regarded only as an approximation to the socially acceptable minimum living standard.
Can you give me a broad idea of the evolution of poverty line in India?
As we can see, rural and urban per capita expenditure requirements per month number has increased from 20 rupees and 25 rupees per month to 672 and 859 rupees per month respectively. Rural and urban calorie intake requirement per capita per day has moved from 2,250 for rural and urban to 2,400 for rural and 2,100 for urban, and then finally has been reduced to 1,800 for rural and urban. In 60s, the poverty line was influenced by the work of Dandekar and ICMR balanced diet approach. In 70s and 80s, it was influenced by Task Force 1979 and Nutrient Expert Group Age Sex Activity Allowances. In 90s and 2000s by Lakkadwala Committee Report 93 and Tendulkar Committee Report 2009-2010. Gradually, we have moved from defining poverty from consumption approach, that is calorie requirement, to multidimensional approach, that is based on nutrient, education, healthcare, energy, shelter, etc.